Hi, this is Scott Miller. Welcome to my top performance blog. It is the 2nd of January 2017, and we are starting the year off right. Today, I'm speaking with Tony Rousmaniere. Tony, hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Oh, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Tony, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I am clinical faculty at University of Washington, and most of my time is actually spent in private practice here
Okay.
in Seattle, where I work with adults, outpatient setting.
And how long have we known each other?
Man, years. Yeah, right. I remember hearing your talks on Psy.D. That's how long ago it was when I was in
Okay.
graduate school.
Okay.
And it was your talks about feedback informed treatment
Mm.
using the ORS, SRS. And honestly, it was just the energy with which you give your talks, your presentations, just
Mm.
blew me away. It came through just in the audio. And I've been following your writings for years. And then it was maybe 6 years ago or so, I emailed you because I wanted to, pursue some research involving the ORS SRS. And then you connected me with Robin Babins-Wagner, and we've been
Kind of
working
gone from
together.
there.
Yeah, ever
And
since.
Robbie Babins-Wagner runs the Calgary Counseling Center, and she is sort of a force in terms of outcome
Yeah,
measurement. She really is, has been
yeah.
one of the longest running implementations of feedback informed care really in the world. And I know that you've really tapped into a gold mine there in terms of research, and it's also pushed your interest in a particular direction. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so she's really at the cutting edge of using feedback informed treatment and outcome measurement to improve treatment. And she's been very generous with
Yeah,
sharing her data, making it accessible for research. And the angle that we looked at was looking particularly at supervision.
right.
Can we use outcome data to help determine where supervision is being effective or not?
And what did you find in that initial study?
Well, in the initial study, we found that supervisors accounted for less than 0.1% of the variance in client outcome.
Now, help me with that. Put that
Y-
together
Yeah,
with the other data that we know about, which is that therapists say that one of the top 3 places they really learn about
yeah,
therapy is from supervision. How do you square this?
yeah. I'm a big fan of supervision. I supervise myself. I think it's essential. And research has shown that supervision has pretty reliably positive effects on the supervisee.
Right.
So professionalization, maybe reducing supervisee anxiety, um,
Acquisition of skills.
acquisition of knowledge.
There we go.
Yeah. So we can get to that in a little bit.
Okay.
Acquisition of theories, ethical behaviors, that kind of thing. Supervision also can have some negative effects on supervisees if it's not done well.
Mm.
But what research has not conclusively shown is that supervision actually impacts client outcomes, at least reliably.
And can you help the listeners understand what that means in real world terms?
Um, so let's say I have a supervisee and they have a client,
Mm.
right? The supervisee talks about the case with me, the supervisor. I give them advice, I help them process their thoughts, feelings about the case, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Now, the the unstated assumption is that this will help the client improve,
Of course.
right?
Yeah.
However, research has not conclusively made the case that that happens. In fact, there's a growing body of research showing that supervision doesn't reliably impact client outcome
Okay.
and sometimes doesn't impact it at all.
All right. And so clearly this begins to lead you in search of something new and different, an explanation, an idea. What happened?
Yeah, so I've since I started, I got into, like most therapists, I went to graduate school, I got into the field because I want to help people,
Yeah.
right? We get into this field because we want to help people.
Sounds cliche, but it's
It,
absolutely true.
it's absolutely true. No one gets into this field to, get rich or anything like that, right? I mean, we really want to help people,
Right.
and it's a really cool thing about being in the field. And what I noticed, well, first of all, right away in my first practicum, I helped a lot of people very quickly. It was really exciting. They're called fast responders in the research literature.
Mm.
And I'm like, wow, I'm a natural. This is great. And I'm like, this is gonna be super easy, right? laughing now,
Yeah, that's
right?
right.
But as the months went by and then the years went by, I realized that there was actually a large proportion of my clients that I was not helping,
Hmm.
that were not improving, that many of them were dropping out of
Hmm.
therapy,
Hmm.
and a small but significant proportion of them were actually deteriorating, actually getting worse.
Hmm. How
And
did you know that?
well, I, at first I just had a gut feeling something
Okay.
was off.
All
And
right.
honestly, at first I felt ashamed and embarrassed and like, oh, I just gotta, hide this. Um, but what really helped me see it uh, accurately was using the outcome rating scale.
Hmm.
I noticed that there are all these different people, peers and supervisors saying your work is good, your work is bad, but none of it was tethered to any outcome data.
Okay.
Right. It was all just personal opinion. And, personal opinion is valuable. But I was like, what if I get an empirical look at my data? So I started collecting my own outcome data
Hmm.
using the outcome rating scale. And I found over the years that while a good percentage of my clients were getting better, generally around half weren't. At least 25%, often more, were dropping out.
Hmm.
5 to 10% or so were deteriorating,
Okay.
which means getting worse over treatment. And maybe a third or so, roughly, were just plateauing.
Okay. So let
Now,
me just repeat those
yeah,
stats. Is that okay? Can you keep your train of thought?
please, yeah,
So 5 to 10% were deteriorating. Once you begin to
yeah,
measure,
yeah,
25% around
yeah,
disappeared. They dropped out.
dropped out, yeah,
50%, when you looked at your overall data for those who stayed,
yeah.
didn't change.
They didn't change or got worse. They're in that kind of broad category of not positive response.
And then about a third of the total who stayed were plateauing. In other words, they
Yeah.
experienced some benefit, but then it wasn't moving any further than that.
Yeah, and honestly, sometimes that was the most frustrating
Hmm.
because I'd experienced that myself as a client, as I'd done a lot of therapy when I was younger. Therapy really, saved my butt when I was a teenager, dropping out of high school after high school. It really helped. But then when I was older, I went back to therapy, and the therapist was very nice. We had a good relationship. We had all the things you would think of were important for therapy. We
Right.
talked about very meaningful things.
Yeah.
I did my best as a client to be very open, to challenge myself. He had all kinds of very valuable insights. And yet, despite years of this quote unquote good therapy, I wasn't getting better. I wasn't, my friends would comment like I was really good about talking about therapy, but I actually wasn't changing in my life.
Okay.
And so this is a big deal for me to help clients kind of break out of that plateau
All right. Why'd you keep going?
because I was desperate.
Okay.
Why do our clients come to us?
Yeah.
Because they're desperate. Rarely is therapy the first choice.
Yeah.
Generally, someone's tried everything else they can,
Yes.
but they just really need to change. And so I didn't really know where else to turn.
It's interesting to me to hear you say this because clients who are so-called resistant get a lot of attention, a lot of ink in our field. But this particular client group that includes yourself doesn't get spoken about a great deal or written about, and that is the people who are really hoping that you will help them. They're
Yes.
desperate for help, and they keep coming. They even try to help you out in some
Yes.
way to see if they can't make it
Yeah.
work. Okay, well, keep going, Tony. I don't want to interrupt the flow.
So I figure all this out in my training. I'm like, wow, half my clients aren't getting better. And so then I just go on a search for how can I improve as a therapist.
Hmm.
And I start by learning a lot of different models. I go to a lot of workshops, I read a lot of books. There's a lot of great models out there. There are a lot of really interesting approaches to therapy,
Yeah.
and a lot of great, workshops. And however, I found that none of it really helped me with what I called my other 50%. That's the clients that aren't really responding to treatment,
Right.
right? Or deteriorating or dropping out.
So all these ideas were interesting, but ultimately that other 50%, the people, it doesn't change anything.
It didn't change anything. And part of the issue I found was that these models have various ideas, theories, techniques. But when I went to implement them, with the clients, I would just get stuck in the same morass.
Hmm.
I had Tony blocks to successful therapy, right?
These aren't like really cool looking buff blocks. These, you mean
Yeah.
Tony Rousmaniere blocks, right?
Like a wall stopping me from proceeding.
Okay.
And when I heard people, I'd go to these conferences or whatever, and people would debate this model versus that model versus this model, right? Like
Hmm.
dynamics is better with the unconscious, or CBT is better with, behavioral stuff or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I'd be like, that's all very interesting, but what I really need help with was my limits,
Yeah.
right? With Tony's N of one limits working with
Okay.
my clients, right? And I just wasn't getting that from reading the books and studying the models.
So if I'm getting this right, then the focus begins to shift from, in your mind at least, away from just focusing on the clients, what's wrong with them, or the treatment models and what's right with those. But what is it that holds you back?
It's like we all have an N of one model that's us,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Mm.
informed by other models and what we've learned.
Sure.
But there are these blocks within my model.
Mm.
And so I got very focused on how can I kind of unlock those blocks in just within me.
Yeah.
Um, and they're very idiosyncratic to me.
Yeah. So if you go to a conference or a continuing education workshop, you're getting fairly general suggestions based on general categories of clients or client therapist behaviors. You're not really getting information specific to you, your roadblocks, the things that interrupt you that are tied to your personal history, your learning, etc.
Yeah, that's what I really was missing
Hmm.
is someone, first of all, digging deep into my personal challenges, but then even more so, providing a route to improve. I describe it kind of like imagine you're learning to paint,
Hmm.
and you went to your painting teacher and described your painting to the painting teacher. And you said, well, I used a lot of red this time. I think it might have been too much. There was a bit of green in the lower right corner, and I went lighter in the top half. What do you
Right.
think?
Right.
People who
Right.
looked at it didn't really like it. What do you think I should do differently? Yeah, I
Exactly.
mean, and so it was about the same time in my progression that I did the interview with yourself, where I was
Hmm.
interviewing you. This is for Victor Yalom's website, the psychotherapy.net.
Yeah.
Um, and the interview was ostensibly about feedback informed treatment, right?
Yeah.
Um, and you brought up this crazy idea, which I hadn't considered before, of deliberate practice.
Hmm.
And so I was like, wow, what's that? And you're like, there's this really exciting, potentially revolutionary way to approach psychotherapy training.
Hmm.
And I was like, wow, this is, what I'm really interested in. This is what I'm looking for, right?
Yeah.
So that's what got me interested in deliberate practice.
And deliberate practice is, you're seeing this as a way to develop a personalized training program that aims at improving your skills, removing your blocks to practice.
Yes, it's highly, highly personalized.
And you've written a book about this on this particular topic, deliberate practice. It's coming out from Routledge. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's called Deliberate Practice for Psychotherapists.
Wow.
And it's about deliberate practice, but it's actually more about my personal journey
Hmm.
trying to become a more effective therapist.
And as you tell this story, Tony, are you finding that therapists know this story themselves personally? Are you finding people scrunch up their nose and saying, I can't relate? What's your experience so far?
So I find that a lot of therapists can relate.
Mm.
When I started writing this, I actually started writing the book as part. It was originally going to be the introduction chapter for the edited volume that we have coming out soon.
That's right.
Right?
The title is?
Cycle of Excellence.
And this is a book coming out from,
This is coming out from Wiley.
and it's application to training and supervision.
Yeah, so it's applying science of expertise, deliberate practice to clinical supervision, clinical training. Co-editors are Bruce Wampold and Rodney Goodniger, along with yourself and myself.
Yeah.
And as you know, that's a bit more of an academic volume. I mean,
Yeah.
it's practical, but we brought together researchers from across a variety of fields to explore the research.
Very excited about that, but tell us about your book.
Okay, so I was working up rough drafts for the introduction for the edited volume. And what kept coming out was just my personal narrative story of like,
Mm.
wow, I'm not helping half my clients. How can I help my clients? I tried CEs, didn't work. I tried workshops, it didn't work. I tried models, it didn't work.
Mm.
And at first I was like, I can't write this. This is too personal. I can't let everyone know that like I'm,
Right.
not helping half my clients.
Right.
But then as I kept rereading it, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't about me. This is about everyone. Yeah, well, what I found is that I just have a lot of peers that, kind of quietly would let me know, like, oh, I have a dropout problem, or, oh, I have these clients I've had for 5 years that aren't improving.
Right.
But we kind of whisper it to each other,
Right.
and then there's this kind of cloak of like embarrassment or shame around
Yeah.
it,
Yeah, there
right?
is.
And that makes it really hard to improve when we
Right.
can't just acknowledge our limits,
Right.
especially when they're universal limits,
Yes, they
right?
are. Yeah, you find out that your secret is the same one everybody has.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And even worse, there's some teachers out there that claim to have no dropouts or claim to have, 90% of their clients succeed or,
Yeah.
this crazy stuff. So
Yeah.
that doesn't help. So so I realized that writing this as an introduction to the edited volume wouldn't work because it's such a personal thing. So I just kind of turned it into its own book, which
Mm.
is a really narrative description of kind of my journey, realizing my clinical limits,
Yeah.
and then struggling to get better,
Mm-hmm.
discovering deliberate practice
Mm.
through yourself, and then
Mm.
exploring it.
Mm-hmm.
And the book ends with me still struggling to get better.
Yeah.
I am not an expert therapist yet. Honestly, I don't know if I ever will be. What matters to me is that I keep improving.
Yeah.
That's what really wakes me up in the morning, you know?
Well, and it seems that your experience fits some of the findings that are emerging. For example, Helene Neeson-Lee's research suggests that once you go down this particular path of deliberate practice, humility seems to be the biggest result. You really see how much progress there is to be made,
Yeah.
rather than how far you've come. What are the big takeaways from this process that you've experienced? I mean, I hear several of them. One is that you might as well admit the truth about your
Yeah.
practice. See it for what it is.
Yeah.
Another one is, it sounds like you really do have to measure your outcomes to see where you
Yeah.
do line up. If you are one of that 10% who is at the 90th percentile,
Yeah.
fantastic.
Right.
Most of us aren't. Are there others that just sort of are a takeaway?
So yeah, there's a few others. One is to get highly individualized performance feedback on our work.
And where would you get that?
So I suggest finding what I call as a clinical skills coach.
Hmm.
And I see this as a little different than a supervisor
Mm-hmm.
because a supervisor has many roles. It's a very broad job, but primarily to ensure the quote unquote competent delivery of services,
Hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, it's very important.
Hmm.
That means ethical behaviors and all the paperwork's being done and all that kind of stuff,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
But by the time that's all done, it's hard to squeeze in any actual skill development.
Right.
So sometimes a supervisor can serve as a skills coach, but I actually recommend you almost think of trying to get that from someone else.
Okay.
Um,
Somebody who has that particular skill set that you're looking for.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, that is hard to assess these days because
Yeah.
the standard in our field is, no one collects their outcome data and no one makes it available to the public.
Hmm.
So the only way we know if someone's a good therapist is how well they talk about therapy or
Right.
write about therapy.
Right.
Now, I tell you, I can talk very well about therapy.
I like talking about therapy more than doing it, actually.
I can write a great essay about therapy, and if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
read that essay, you could be lulled into thinking that I'm a great therapist.
All right.
However, if you watch 5 minutes of a video of me working with a client, you might see something very different,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's unfortunately, as it stands now, it's very tricky picking someone that you think is. The way I recommend doing it is show your videotapes your work to someone and see if they can give you good, actionable, not just advice on what to do with a client, but advice on how to learn those skills.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. Two different pieces. Not only what to do, but how to learn to do that.
They're very different. Now, if you go to
Absolutely.
most other fields, whether it's chess or sports or music, the coach's job or the teacher's job is not just to teach you how to perform, but how to
Learn.
train.
Yeah, that's
Exactly.
right. Exactly. What are the other takeaways for you?
Another one is so taking the skills exercises from the coach,
Yep.
right, or supervisor, and just practicing a lot.
Okay.
Now, the word practicing is problematic in therapy because we use the word practice to mean like I have a practice, I do therapy, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, as you've noted yourself, th that's actually work performance,
Yeah.
right? Like you don't learn to be an expert musician by giving a lot of performances,
No,
right? You don't learn to be an expert athlete by playing a lot of games or
that's right.
matches,
That's right.
right? So in all these other fields, people become experts by spending many hours alone or in small groups,
Mm.
with or without a coach, engaging in repetitive behavioral rehearsal, drilling down on specific skills, and doing them again and again and again until the skills move into procedural memory.
Right.
It should work at a kind of a threshold of strain,
Hmm.
right? Not too much, but also not too little.
Mm.
And otherwise, it just really isn't benefiting. Let me give you an example. I drive almost every day.
Yeah.
I get feedback on my driving quite frequently from my wife.
Oh,
It's
okay.
very,
Oh, in Chicago, you get it from the other
oh
drivers,
yeah, you can also
including
get
your
rid of
partner.
the driver. Now here in Seattle, it's very polite. But and my wife gives me very accurate feedback on my driving. In fact, she'll point out how I make the same mistake again and again and again, year
Yeah.
after year after year. But I don't set aside time to specifically rehearse improving those skills. And
Right.
so, a decade later, I'm no better. I'm probably a little worse than when I started.
Right. It's this myth, I suppose, as well, that being told something and even being aware of what that something is you need to change should translate into change. We work with clients and we know that change is challenging and difficult in the best of circumstances. Why would we expect it to be any different in changing our
Exactly.
therapeutic skills? Perfect.
Exactly.
Perfect. So let me ask you, in the midst of this practice,
Yeah.
what keeps you going? Because when you watch a video of your
Yeah.
work, I have to tell you, I always tell clinicians when I advise
Yeah.
the same thing, that you're going to find lots to loathe in
Yes.
a session. How do you keep going in the face of such slow progress and such daunting large changes?
Yeah, they call deliberate practice short-term effort for long-term gain,
Mm,
right?
mm,
And what keeps me going is wanting to be better. I have a reminder that pops up every day in my calendar that it says, "How good do you want to be in 5 years?" And if I want to be better in 5 years than I am today, I practice today.
mm.
If I ever hit a point where I'm like, I'm good enough, then I'll stop practicing.
Yeah. Perfect.
So.
So a constant reminder is how you keep it going. And it seems that some of the expertise literature is also saying that after a while that chase becomes a reward in and of itself.
So I have found that, but I'm hesitant to tell that to other people because it took a long time.
Hmm. How long
So
how long did it take? That's
uh,
a good
it's
observation.
it's taken a few years, and
Yeah.
it's still only there on some days.
Mm,
There are some days where it is literally the hardest thing I do is make myself practice.
right.
I will do anything else, and it's really surprising to me. Actually, doing real therapy is so much easier than practicing.
Yeah.
Being in supervision is so much easier than practicing.
Yes.
And so I'm hesitant to tell anyone it's inherently rewarding in any
Yeah.
way because it takes a long time for that to kick in.
No, that's right. I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
So Tony, give me the names of the two books again.
So there's Deliberate Practice for Psychotherapists is a personal narrative book. And then there's The Cycle of Excellence is our edited volume with Bruce Wampold and Rodney Goodyear.
And how can people get a hold of you if they want to talk with you more, get a consultation, chat with you about setting up their own schedule for deliberate practice? How would they get a hold of you?
So through my website is probably the easiest way. That's drtonyr.com. And I am available for consultations about deliberate practice. I just want to emphasize I'm not an expert therapist yet, so I am not available for that whole kind of model.
Right.
And however, I am totally obsessed with becoming a better therapist. And I honestly I think and this is something frankly I learned from you. If our field can shift to focusing more on becoming better therapists, right? Than what we have been doing, then
Right.
hopefully we can all improve.
It's really a sign of optimism and hope. There's a lot of hard work in it, but I love your words. I think they are really pieces of sage advice. You have to be obsessed with getting better, not being the best therapist on the planet.
Eh,
What?
That's not in the cards for me, and so, but that's fine. It turns out, if I can help 5% more people per year over 20 years, I mean, that's a huge
The
difference.
numbers are staggering. The numbers
Right.
are staggering. Tony, hey, thanks for spending this second day of
Yeah.
January with me, and I look forward to chatting in the future and your continued work in this area of deliberate practice.
Great. Thanks for having me.